Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
Nonverbal communication and digging for clues to get to the root of who people really are. Did you know that 93% of our communication is delivered non-verbally? So extracting the correct information starts with your openness and then observing how things unfold. Today, we're going to hone your ability to read people better in an interview. Today's quote, "You don't have to tell me what your limits are. When the decisions you make, your actions and body language says it all." And I'm sure you know who said that, don't you, Ernie?
Oh, I do.
And that was Marlon Rico Lee.
Yep.
I don't even know who he is, do you?
He's an artist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs and hiring managers avoid costly hiring mistakes. We identify a specific problem and provide tactical solutions to solve your company's toughest hiring challenges. And we share insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, disruptors, and industry experts like our guest today, Ernie Basulto. Ernie is the Director of Human Resources of Antis Roofing and Waterproofing. Ernie developed an early interest in cultural and human relations as he grew up in two separate countries. Very cool. I'm jealous. He was inspired by his father to develop ongoing needs of the workforce and has done so by providing support and guidance to both business leaders and employees. Ernie has a was a senior human resources business partner at the fifth largest retail mortgage lender in the nation, and is currently the director of HR at Antis Roofing and Waterproofing, which is an amazing company. I love that place. Yep. Where he provides leadership for all aspects of HR, including hiring practices, establishes culture, and guidelines, and guides employees to find their purpose at work, which is why I love you guys, because you guys have this great culture. So, Ernie, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show.
Thank you for having me today.
I'm happy to have you. So, today we're going to cover how to build rapport, and then we're going to talk about reading verbal and nonverbal cues.
Yep.
So let's start out with the obvious question. Why is this important?
Well, it's important because a lot of business leaders will hire somebody just for the skill. And they have a position to fill, they go after it, and they say, oh, they have the skills, that's who we're going with.
Like 90% of companies do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what kind of problems is that? I'd rather you say it than me, but what kind of problems does that create?
Well,
pray tell, do tell.
Yes. When we forget that when we hire someone, we hire the whole person.
Yeah.
Not just the skill. And that could be a problem. So when we hire someone, we hire all the skills and all the good, but we also hire the blemishes as well.
Sure.
And that can be a problem down the line sometimes.
And most often is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of like, the analogy might be something like getting married to somebody just because they're wearing your favorite kind of shoes.
Absolutely.
In a way, right?
Yeah, kind of, because sometimes we just have such a need. We want this done. We want it filled. And we're just going to go with whoever kind of fits the bill. And like you said, I like their color shoes. And that's not always the case.
Not a good idea. All right, so let's delve into it. Let's talk about how you build rapport, because I think that's something you do really well in an interview process from what we've discussed off camera.
Yeah.
So talk to me. I mean, I have my methodology that you do, but run me through kind of what you like to do or what you how you set this thing up.
Sure. So in the interview process, like you said, it's important to build rapport with someone. And in an hour or less, sometimes it's hard to do that. So what I do is I just talk to the person. I just ask a lot of questions. A lot of the times.
Well, isn't that what most companies or most people do, though?
Yes, most companies, most leaders will ask questions. Just
where do you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah, exactly. And those aren't the questions we need to ask.
No.
I think it's important to ask situational questions or things that will highlight their behavior. So I'll ask questions about themselves, being careful, of course, in California, because we have to be watchful of what we ask.
Yeah.
But I like to ask for stories. I ask people, tell me about a time when this happened. And then I get to see the other side of them. And then I listen intently, and then I mirror what they say.
So essentially, you're using a behavioral question as a way to get them comfortable.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So run me through how you do that.
Well,
like let's say, I don't want to do a mock interview or anything, but let's just say, like, somebody comes in.
yeah.
How do you make them? An interview is a stressful thing.
Yes, very much.
And most of the time, you get somebody who's nervous, who's, it's not easy on the person who's interviewing a lot of times.
Right.
So how do you get past that?
Well, first I like to ask just basic questions. I'll ask, run me through your resume.
Okay.
Talk to me about just these basic things about your skills, and I'll ask about their skills as well, because that's what we do in an interview. We want to make sure we have the right person.
Sure.
But after that, then I start asking behavioral questions.
Like, what are you looking for, though, in a resume? Because a lot of times that's a trap, right? You go down that path and you start talking about their resume for a half hour. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, then why'd you do that? And then it becomes more of a
skills-based?
Yeah, more of an inquisition than it does an actual, like, conversation.
Right. So instead of saying, okay, so I see that you worked at ABC company, tell me about what you did there. Although, that might be a good
Which
approach.
leads us to the body language piece, because
yes.
when you start doing that, you're usually kind of defensive and closed off.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
we'll get to that later.
Yeah. So you get the kind of the quote-unquote best version of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because they prepared for that. What they're not always prepared for is walk me through your resume, kind of tell me about your history, and kind of walk me through, like, your most recent position, and then walk me backwards.
Okay.
So that's a different way to see it, because now they're going to tell me a story. So I'm going to take them off of their, I rehearsed this mode, and I'm going to take them to, tell me your story, your professional story. So in that, they begin to just interject their opinion sometimes about it, or how they felt about it.
Wouldn't it be better, though, to have them walk you through their story from the beginning? So tell me about, like, where you grew up, your childhood. Do you have any crazy aunts and uncles? Like, whatever stories from there. Because usually people tend to ramp up from there, right?
Yeah, well, of course, the beginning of the interview, we just don't sit down and, okay, hi, tell me about your resume. It's more like, hey, how was your day? Was it okay coming in? I have to be, of course, very careful in California. We don't want to ask, so I see you're married. So does that mean you have kids? Oh, no, we can't have that here.
No.
So we just ask. I ask lighthearted questions. And tell me a bit about that, and then we dive into their path, their professional path.
Got it.
Be it from beginning to end to beginning, whatever it is.
So what are you doing to settle their nerves? You're just kind of having that kind of chit chat thing up front.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's good. You're getting them in a mindset where, like, okay, this guy's kind of cool. I'm comfortable with him.
Yeah, and I make sure that I mirror. So I think that's very important, is to say, oh, so you did this. Oh, wow. And then make a comment about it. Or to say, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about this. So this way I'm showing interest in the person.
Yeah.
And I really am actually genuinely interested. So it's just having a conversation.
Yeah, and you're digging in and gaining the evidence that you need, too, to formulate an opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the best way, by the way, to eliminate bias.
Yes.
Is to gather evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I want to gather. I want to see who the person is. And by their storytelling, I'm going to tell, or it's going to tell me who they are.
That is so important. All right, so you're going through the story. What if they're a terrible storyteller?
Well, sometimes
there's a lot of people there's a lot of people out there. Like, I find they'll just give you yes or no answers, or maybe just kind of feed you limited responses, right? Maybe they just don't want to talk about that.
Well, it's important not to ask yes or no questions.
Sure.
So it's important to ask, tell me about a time, or how do you feel about this? How do you approach this? So this way I get the storytelling. And to your answer your question, what if they're a terrible storyteller?
Yeah.
Well, for some positions, that might not be a bad thing. If it's
like engineers or accountants, they usually kind of tend to be different. They're wired differently.
Yeah. Their thought process is differently, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And for example, with an accountant, if an accountant is better friends with paper than with people, sometimes that's okay. But I'm not going to dismiss a candidate if they can't tell a great story.
They still have to be congruent with your culture, though.
Absolutely.
To be fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So if you're just joining us on the live cast or the live stream of the podcast, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. My name is Rick Gerard, and today our guest is Ernie Basulto. He's the Director of Human Resources at Antis Roofing and Waterproofing. All right. So let's dig into how we structure an interview and what we're looking for, because I think that's kind of interesting, right? So you're getting them comfortable, you're bringing them in, then you're kind of having them walk through things with you, right? So now as you're gathering this information, what do we do with it? How are we processing it?
So as we gather the info, one of the things that I look at is, again, how they're telling me that story. Because I want to see who this person is. I want to see what they're going to bring to the company. So if I'm a business owner, this person is coming in, I want to make sure if I'm paying a salary that I'm getting, not just, I don't want to say my money's worth. I want to make sure that they add to our culture, to our goals, to where we're headed.
Sure.
So I want to see and be able to, see through the interview that they're going to be able to provide that, not just for me or for us, but for the organization as a whole.
Now, are you having others speak to this person as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the supervisor, maybe even the team, if that's where, if that's important, which it always is.
Yeah.
You want to make sure they get along.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could say in preparation, one of the things that I recommend to our leaders is build questions around the goals for the position. So what I do is I coach them on making sure that they fill these check these boxes. So
like what boxes for you guys?
So for one is will the person does their experience align with the job description or the needs of the position? That's the one thing you have to look for, or that's the first box.
For you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
So align the questions around these 4 items. So one is, will the person align with the job description or the requirements?
Well, I know purpose is a big thing for your company, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So how are you judging whether or not somebody is purposable or has a purpose? Right.
Well, several ways to do it, but one is when you ask questions around culture or around how they view things. One of the things that I look at is how they respond to things. Some folks are very, how do I say it? They have a mindset when coming into a position.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that they're teachable. One of the things that I find out in an interview is if a person is teachable, humble, are they going to be able to give? Because, for example, our culture, it is purpose-based. And people come in with wanting to serve and give. It's the whole servant leadership model.
Sure.
So part of the questions I ask is, hey, ask about these things. And you see it in the person's response. You see it in how they respond to the question.
Well, and which leads us into kind of nonverbal forms of communication, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So we're talking about behavioral questions that you kind of lead up. You're gathering the information, which is awesome. I love it because that's what I preach all the time.
Yeah.
So structured in such a way. Now, let's talk about nonverbal communication, because this is a really important part that I think a lot of us forget.
Yeah.
One is I think it's really important that whenever you get into these interactions, you really need to be the one who's open in your nonverbal communication, right? Your body language needs to be open. You need to be friendly. You need to be the one who's kind of putting that person in ease, which you tend to do just by nature, I think. But in general, I don't think a lot of people do that. They kind of treat that interview as maybe being a little bit more adversarial in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to test this guy and see if I can throw him off.
Yeah, kind of, but that's not the point of an interview.
No.
In my opinion.
No, the point of an interview is to get to the truth of who that person is.
Yeah, it's is this person going to align with the goals?
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it is. So I think the body language, the nonverbal cues, that's really what we want to look for in a person.
All right, so what do you tend to look for in nonverbal communication? What are you aware of that you're looking at?
Well, I watch what a person says as well as how they say it.
Okay.
So, for example, and people naturally will add emotion to how they feel about something. For example, it's like saying sorry. So let's say I offended you. and I say, oh, you know what, Rick, I'm really sorry. I did that. I didn't mean to embarrass you. That
As
was
opposed to
wrong
going,
of me.
sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's...
Like my 8-year-old daughter does.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I watch how they say it. That's how I know, that's how I measure their sincerity.
Yeah.
So in an interview, you can tell when I ask about, hey, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer. If their response is, oh, I was able to help because I did this, and then I did that, and then I was able to get them to the right position, or whatever that it is. Versus, yeah, customers, so annoying. If that's their response, do I really want them front-facing with...
No, you want to weed that out on the phone screen for the most part.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, usually if you could bring somebody on site, they shouldn't have that attitude. God, I would hope not.
I would hope not.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people... again, if you're skills-based, hey, you have the skills, can you come in for an interview?
Yes.
Right. How do you know when somebody's at ease? So this is something that I think a lot of people are not aware of. Mm-hmm. So as you're talking, you're getting somebody comfortable. You know, your demeanor as the interviewer mm-hmm. is the thing that sets the tone. But you have a lot of entrepreneurs, you have a lot of people that are kind of type A personality that are going. How do you know when once you start kind of doing that conversation and you're doing the chit chat, mm-hmm. how do you know that somebody's at ease and you go, okay, now I can break into my questions?
Okay. I look at a lot of things. I look at posture.
Yeah.
So if someone is like sitting at the edge of the desk and they're just fumbling through papers, they're playing with their fingers, something that tells me they're
checking their phone.
Yeah, something is off. This person is not at ease. They're not comfortable. I'm not going to get what I need from them. Yeah. So as questions come and as they see, look, I'm not a threat. It's okay. We're just
it's important that you project that.
Absolutely.
That they understand that you're not a threat, but it's also more important that you kind of get those cues going. You do what you need to do to get them comfortable before you start going into the inquisition part of the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's setting that rapport up front. It's saying that you're safe here.
So you're looking at the posture.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're looking at like somebody's leaning in, leaning back, like what,
Yeah, leaning back. Are they, and on the flip side of that is, are they too comfortable?
Nervous tics.
Yeah.
Yeah, like twitching feet and fumbling fingers and stuff.
It's the whole thing. It's stuttering in the conversation. But then, like I said, on the flip side, you have the people that lean back, their legs crossed, they have their arm up on the chair. That's when, okay, they're too comfortable. Maybe they're too important for me. There's a lot of, the body says a lot.
It does. And a lot of times that's kind of over posturing, right? If they're kind of leaning back and it's just too over dramatic. You have to look at the subtle cues, right?
Yes.
All right. So what would you consider to be positive body language? And then we'll flip it as to what would you consider to be not so positive body language, or flags to look at, right?
Sure. So I think when I perceive someone is calm, they're sitting back in their chair. It feels more like a conversation. Like, think of it like when you're talking to a friend. There's just a relaxed energy about the conversation. Hard to describe, but there's just, the person just seems relaxed. Now they're just telling you stories. I can tell when a person...
See, that's too laid back for me sometimes. I mean, so if it's a salesperson or something like that, that would drive me nuts. Like, I had a boss years ago who, like, when somebody would lean back in their chair and put their arms behind their head, would drive him nuts. He'd be like, well, you don't have time to be lazy. Like, that was his perception of being lazy. Like, I'm just cruising.
Well, those are the negative cues.
Right. But also, when you have somebody engaged, you'll see that they tend to lean in.
Yeah, you can tell they are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're listening. They're responding. But there's just a natural rhythm to the conversation is, I guess, what I meant to say.
Sure.
Whereas if someone is fidgety, they're just answering the question. They want to get in and out of your question. They want to make sure they impress you. And they give off that vibe, like, I'm trying to impress you. That's when you can tell, when I can tell that they're not in a good spot.
Well, we as humans, though, tend to mirror, as you mentioned, too, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're going to pull their cues off of you. If you tend to be a little bit more laid back and sitting back in your chair, they should be kind of subconsciously usually mirroring you. Mm-hmm. But you also have to be aware that maybe they're doing that on purpose, too, if they're aware of it.
Yeah, if they're aware of it. Yeah, absolutely. But, those are the things that I look for.
Right.
I try to get them into a place where their defenses are down. And that's what I try to get every candidate to.
Are there any obvious flags that you come across that you're like, okay, when I see people who do that, I know I'm like, some people have a problem with people with eye contact. Mm-hmm. But it's different. Various cultures, some people, some people just don't naturally, like they kind of talk. They're visual and they have to look around, right? Mm-hmm. Anything that kind of cues you off, like, oh God, he does that thing where he sits back in the chair, puts his arm back, and drives me nuts.
Negative cues for me are when they are over relaxed, because that tells me that
they don't give a shit.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
in a way.
Yes, in a way, but it tells me that they're too comfortable. They're too good for me. Therefore, maybe too good for the company. There's no humility there.
Yeah.
I look for these signs, and it's based on our culture for the company. But there are other cultures where we need someone that thinks highly of themselves. And if they don't have that quality, then they're going to suffer here. So why punish them? But for our company in particular, we're looking for that person that's coachable, that can grow, that can be someone that adds to the team. So I look for that humility. Are they able to be taught and be coached? So it really depends, again, on the role, the company, the culture, the team that they're going to be a part of. There's so many factors in there.
Yeah, and you have to be aware of what your environment is, right? I say all the time on the show, it doesn't matter. Like, you have a culture no matter what. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have this serendipitous culture. I mean, there's lots of companies out there that have a very hardcore culture, but they embrace what they are.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You want people that mirror that as opposed to people who are just trying to fit into that.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, back to the skills.
Yeah.
Skills are great, but I'm going to hire the whole person, not just the skill.
I did some reading as I was prepping for this, and there was an FBI agent who wrote an article on shoulder movement and how your shoulders will actually give away more than what you know. Like, he looks at people's shoulders and how they present themselves, how they carry themselves when he can tell when people are lying or uncertain of what they're saying based on shoulder movement. And it was pretty fascinating because he was saying what ends up happening is when people lie, there's a tendency to either look away from you or look at you intently when they lie to you, right? But where he looks is he just watches the shoulders, and he said either one or both shoulders will raise up just kind of slightly. Mm-hmm. And it's your body saying you're uncertain of what you're talking about, which was fascinating to me. So paying attention to shoulder movement, which I would have never thought, might be a good indicator as to whether or not somebody's going to fit. Or whether or not they're telling the truth.
Oh, yeah. I look for those things actually as well, because I can't tell everyone who's lying.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I'm speaking to people, I can tell if they're fabricating something. If they're speaking from experience, or if they're speaking from, this is what I read in an article, and I'm going to impress this person. Sometimes you can tell in the tone that they're saying it in.
Yeah, and that's kind of like our bullshit meter that kind of pops up, right? Like, you're like, I don't know if I really believe that. But I think that you're picking up on those nonverbal cues too.
Yes.
That are present.
Oh yeah, so that's why I watch so intently.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by what they say, but I'm more fascinated by how they're telling me that story.
Absolutely. All right, so key takeaways. Let's talk about, give me 2 or 3 things that you would like the listener to be able to plug into their business today that would help them in, communicating with people and making sure that they're getting the right people.
Sure. One, I'd say when we hire a person, make sure you're okay with the whole person, because you are going to spend probably more than 8 hours a day with this person. You and your team are.
Of course.
So I would say watch for that. The second is not just watch for
what... Well, interview for that too.
Yeah, we should interview for that.
I mean, that's what the point of an interview is.
Yes, absolutely.
You're going to date before you get married, right?
Yes, of course. And the second thing I'd say, watch for not just what they say, but how they say it, is how they tell their story. That's going to be that's going to be a telltale sign of the person you get to be around for a long time during your week.
I think it's important that you get them calm first, right? Make sure that you're getting the true person, like that person in a comfort zone that allows you to extract the information that you need in order for that person to, you can make an educated decision.
Yes.
All right, man. We're just about out of time for today's show. I told you it went by quick, right?
Very quick.
All right, I want to thank you for your time investment today and welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. So now I'm sure that some people would like to find out more about you or your company. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. So our company website is Antis Roofing, ANTIS roofing.com.
Okay.
My email is Ernie at antisroofing.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn because there are not a lot of Ernie Basultos out there. Actually, I think just me.
I think you were the only one I typed in.
Yeah. I will pop up first.
There's like 10 Rick Gerards, and I'm trying to get rid of all of them. So I'm the only one. All right. I know. That'll be our little secret.
Got it.
I want to thank our listening audience for tuning into this week's episode of Higher Power. A quick thanks to our team, our engineer Paul Roberts, our producers Andrea Ballin, Shanti Ryle, and Haley Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. We need your feedback to up our game and bring you more highly valuable content. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, that's H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio.com. Or you can find us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitchers, TuneIn, Spotify, YouTube. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. Tune in next week. Our guest is going to be Mark Angel. Mark is the CEO of Amira Learning. I'm your host, Rick Gerard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power with Rick Gerard on OC Talk Radio.